The air in Hollywood always hummed with a certain arrogance, a self-congratulatory drone that often mistook its own echo for the voice of the people. And at the epicenter of that drone, often with a mischievous twinkle in his eye and a smirk playing on his lips, stood Jim Carrey. For decades, he had carved out a legacy not just as a comedic genius, but as an outspoken cultural commentator, his opinions often as exaggerated as his facial expressions. Lately, however, his comedic jabs had taken a sharper, more political edge, aimed squarely at the very heart of what he considered to be the nation's rising tide of absurdity. He saw himself as a modern-day jester, but his court was now a fractured nation, and his wit, once universally adored, had become a partisan weapon. On the other side of this increasingly polarized divide, a different kind of star was ascendant, Karoline Leavitt. Not from the glittering sound stages of Los Angeles, but from the fiery battlegrounds of American politics. She was a voice that resonated with a growing segment of the population that felt unheard, misrepresented, and frankly, mocked. Leavitt possessed a calm demeanor that belied a formidable intellect and a cutting directness. She didn't rely on theatrics. Her power lay in her unwavering conviction and an uncanny ability to distill complex grievances into undeniable truths. Where Carrey sought to dismantle with satire, Leavitt sought to build with principle. These two titans, seemingly from different universes, were on a collision course, propelled by the very forces dividing the nation. The spark that ignited this inevitable inferno wasn't a policy debate or a political rally. It was a simple image. From the seemingly innocent confines of his art studio, Jim Carrey unveiled his latest masterpiece, a caricature. This wasn't just any drawing. It was a grotesque distortion of a figure deeply revered by Leavitt's conservative base, a sneering, exaggerated mockery designed to provoke. It was a digital insult tossed into the digital ether, meant to garner laughs from his followers and howls of outrage from his critics, and it succeeded wildly. The caricature went viral within hours, a digital wildfire consuming social media. For Carrey, it was another feather in his cap, another testament to his ability to speak truth to power, as his supporters lauded. But for millions of Americans, particularly those who felt represented by the figure in the drawing, it was an egregious act of disrespect, a venomous attack disguised as art. The outrage was immediate, fierce, and unyielding. Calls for boycotts, demands for apologies, and furious denunciations flooded the internet. It was a clear line in the sand, drawn with the sharp, unforgiving strokes of Carrey's digital brush. Among the loudest and clearest voices in this rising chorus of indignation was Karoline Leavitt. She didn't scream or rage. Instead, she responded with characteristic precision, a series of concise social media posts that dissected Carrey's drawing, not just as art, but as a symptom of Hollywood's condescending elitism. Her words, though few, carried the weight of a counter-argument, a challenge issued directly to the jester king of satire. She didn't call for his cancellation. She called for accountability. She implied with quiet confidence that the time for mocking was over, and the time for truth was at hand. The public, sensing the delicious irony of a comedic legend being challenged by a political newcomer, leaned in, their anticipation palpable. The stage was being set for a showdown, not just between two individuals, but between two Americas. Before you dive deeper into this epic clash, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe for more untold stories, and comment below with your thoughts on who you think truly won this battle. The digital battlefield, still smoking from the explosive impact of Carrey's caricature and Leavitt's precise counterstrikes, found its unlikely next arena not on the dusty plains of a political rally, but under the gleaming, meticulously arranged lights of a primetime talk show studio. The producers, with their hawk-like instincts for seismic cultural events, had watched the burgeoning feud with ravenous glee. This wasn't just another celebrity spat. This was a collision of ideologies, a microcosm of America's fractured soul, playing out in real time. And they knew, with the certainty of seasoned showmen, that the ratings would be astronomical. The invitations were dispatched, swift as arrows. Jim Carrey, ever the showman, accepted with a dismissive wave, a glint of anticipated triumph in his eyes. He saw it as another opportunity to wield his legendary wit, to dismantle an opposing viewpoint with the surgical precision of his comedic jabs. Inside his mind, the debate was already won. Leavitt, a mere political operative, stood no chance against the seasoned orator and master satirist. He imagined the audience, rapt, hanging on his every word, erupting in laughter as he reduced her arguments to dust. His team, buzzing around him like excited bees, reinforced this notion, whispering assurances of a comedic knockout. He walked into the studio with the swagger of a gladiator entering the arena, convinced of his inevitable victory. Karoline Leavitt, however, was no ordinary opponent. She received the invitation not with theatrical bravado, but with a quiet, steely resolve. While Hollywood buzzed with predictions of her impending comedic annihilation, Leavitt saw an opportunity. She understood the power of the platform, not as a stage for performance, but as a crucible for truth. Her preparation was meticulous, not just rehearsing talking points, but dissecting Carrey's past interviews, anticipating his rhetorical flourishes, and identifying the weak spots in his often hypocritical pronouncements. She knew she wasn't just debating Jim Carrey. She was representing millions who felt dismissed by the very system he embodied. Her voice, though calm, was being honed into a weapon. There was no nervousness, only a focused determination. The day arrived, shrouded in a palpable tension that transcended the usual pre-show jitters. The studio audience itself was a tableau of the nation's divide. Fiery red MAGA hats stood in stark contrast to glittering Hollywood banners. Liberals and conservatives huddled in their respective camps, their anticipation a tangible force. The air crackled with unspoken animosity and fervent loyalty. Backstage, the buzz was electric. Crew members whispered predictions. Even the usually stoic stagehands felt the tremor of an impending event. This wasn't just a talk show, it was a modern-day coliseum, and the gladiators were about to enter. Then, the moment arrived. The iconic theme music swelled, lights flared, and the audience erupted into a cacophony of applause and scattered boos. First, Jim Carrey strode out, flashing his trademark grin, soaking in the adulation, pausing to revel in the moment. His gaze, even from across the stage, seemed to challenge, to mock. Then, Karoline Leavitt. Her entrance was less flamboyant, more measured. She moved with quiet confidence, her eyes scanning the crowd, acknowledging supporters with a subtle nod, yet meeting the gaze of her detractors with an unyielding directness. As they finally took their seats, positioned across from each other like generals on a battlefield, the host's voice, usually so smooth and commanding, seemed almost tentative, a small ripple on the surface of an ocean about to erupt. The first exchange, a seemingly innocuous greeting, carried the weight of a declared war. The stage was set. The battle was about to begin. The debate began as many expected, a clash of styles, a cacophony of carefully crafted arguments and dismissive quips. Jim Carrey, with his signature theatricality, launched into a verbose monologue, weaving together pop culture references, political jabs, and rhetorical questions, all designed to paint Karoline Leavitt's position as outdated, unsophisticated, and ultimately irrelevant. His voice boomed, his hands gesticulated wildly, and his eyes, bright with the thrill of performance, darted across the audience, soaking in the scattered laughs and enthusiastic applause from his loyalists. He was in his element, a one-man wrecking ball of satire. He saw Leavitt as merely a static target, ready to crumble under the weight of his comedic assault. But Karoline Leavitt was no ordinary target. She listened, not with deference, but with a quiet intensity, her gaze unblinking, betraying no emotion. When it was her turn, her voice, though calm, cut through the studio's charged atmosphere like a surgeon's scalpel. She didn't shout. She articulated. She didn't joke, she reasoned. She dismantled Carrey's elaborate comedic edifice piece by precise piece, exposing the flimsy foundations beneath the glitter and showmanship. She spoke of genuine concerns, of the forgotten voices, of the stark realities that Carrey, from his gilded perch, seemed intent on caricaturing away. Each of her points landed with the quiet weight of undeniable fact, forcing Carrey's smirk to falter, if only for a fraction of a second. The debate escalated, the polite veneer of talk show discourse chipping away with every exchange. Carrey, unaccustomed to such unflappable resistance, grew visibly frustrated. His usual comedic arsenal, once a weapon of mass amusement, seemed to rebound off Leavitt's stoic composure. He tried sarcasm, she met it with sincerity. He tried ridicule, she countered with an uncomfortable truth. Feeling his grip on the narrative slipping, sensing the murmurs of uncertainty even among his supporters, Carrey's face hardened. His comedic mask began to crack, revealing a flicker of genuine irritation beneath. Then came the moment. In a desperate attempt to reclaim control, to deliver a knockout blow, Carrey leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. He launched into a particularly venomous tirade, accusing Leavitt, not just of being wrong, but of being fundamentally, willfully ignorant, a pawn in a larger, darker game. He finished with a flourish, a dismissive wave of his hand, as if to sweep her and her entire ideology off the stage. "You live in a fantasy," he sneered, "a delusion. You're just unaware." The words hung in the air, heavy with condescension. A hush fell over the studio, a collective intake of breath from the audience, sensing the line had been crossed. But Leavitt didn't flinch. She didn't respond with anger, nor did she cower. Instead, she let his words hang there, allowing their arrogance to echo. She paused, a pregnant silence stretching between them, a moment that felt like an eternity. Her eyes, calm and unwavering, locked onto Jim Carrey's. His smirk, though initially intact, now seemed pasted on, his eyes flickering with a nascent doubt. The cameras zoomed in, capturing every micro-expression on their faces. Then her voice, steady and clear, resonated through the tense silence, carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. She uttered a single word, sharp and precise, cutting through the theatrical facade of the Hollywood legend: mirror. Just one word, not a sentence, not a tirade, but a solitary, perfectly aimed dart. The effect was instantaneous, devastating. Jim Carrey's face, usually a canvas of exaggerated emotion, crumpled. His smirk didn't just falter, it evaporated, replaced by a look of profound shock, then a raw, unconcealed anger, swiftly followed by a flicker of something akin to genuine fear. His eyes, moments ago so confident, now darted away, unable to hold her gaze. He physically recoiled, a barely perceptible twitch of his shoulders. The air was sucked out of the room, leaving only the deafening silence of a truth too potent to ignore. Jim Carrey, the master of performance, the king of comedy, had just been stripped bare by a single, perfectly placed word. He was exposed, and in that moment he truly lost it. The single word, mirror, hung in the studio air like a perfectly thrown dart, its tip quivering in the bullseye of Jim Carrey's carefully constructed persona. The jester's mask, so long his impenetrable defense, had shattered. His face, moments ago a canvas of exaggerated confidence, contorted into a mosaic of disbelief, then raw indignation, and finally a chilling flash of something akin to panic. The familiar smirk that had defined his public image was gone, replaced by a slack-jawed emptiness, his eyes wide and unfocused. He stammered, a guttural sound caught in his throat, attempting to form a retort. Any retort, but only disjointed. Syllables emerged, pathetic and hollow. The once quick-witted maestro of mockery was suddenly, tragically, mute. The audience, a divided sea of anticipation, erupted. Not in unified applause, but in a fractured roar. From one side, a surge of thunderous cheers, whistles and triumphant shouts erupted. The supporters of Leavitt, who had waited years for such a moment, saw their champion deliver a decisive, almost poetic blow. From the other, a stunned silence descended, punctuated by gasps and hushed whispers. Carrey's ardent admirers, accustomed to his untouchable comedic reign, watched in horrified disbelief as their idol, the fearless satirist, buckled under the weight of a single syllable. Hollywood, usually so boisterous and self-assured, seemed to hold its collective breath, witnessing a public unraveling unlike any they had seen. Karoline Leavitt, however, remained a picture of serene composure. She didn't gloat, she didn't jump from her seat in triumph. She simply held her gaze, a subtle, almost imperceptible tilt to her head, allowing Carrey's discomfiture to play out for all to see. Her victory was not in a shouted retort, but in the eloquent silence that followed her word, in the undeniable truth that had left her formidable opponent utterly disarmed. She watched him calm as a lake as his frantic attempts to recover only dug his hole deeper. He tried a dismissive wave of his hand, but it lacked conviction. He attempted a forced, sarcastic laugh, but it died in his throat, a hollow, pathetic sound that only underscored his defeat. His entire body language screamed distress, a stark contrast to Leavitt's quiet power. The host, a seasoned professional accustomed to managing volatile discussions, sensed the irreversible damage. The finely tuned machine of primetime television had veered wildly off script. Jim Carrey, the guest they had banked on for fireworks, was now a public spectacle of humiliation. With a nervous glance at the control booth and a barely concealed look of alarm, the host swiftly interjected, his voice unnaturally loud over the fractured audience noise. "We'll have to go to commercial," he announced. His words rushed, almost an apology. The familiar transition music swelled, a sudden, jarring intrusion designed to paper over the gaping wound left on the stage. As the cameras cut away, the facade dropped completely. Carrey, no longer bound by the illusion of a live broadcast, sprang from his seat, his face contorted in a silent scream of rage and mortification. He shoved past a bewildered crew member, his eyes wild, seeking an escape from the unbearable weight of public defeat. Meanwhile, Karoline Leavitt remained seated, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. She had landed her punch, precise and devastating. The battle wasn't just won. It had been concluded with an efficiency that would send shockwaves far beyond the confines of the studio. The immediate aftermath was chaos for one, quiet satisfaction for the other. The digital world was already ablaze. The news of Jim Carrey's spectacular one-word defeat spreading like wildfire through every phone and screen, a story already carving its indelible mark on the annals of viral moments. The digital realm, an insatiable beast of information and reaction, consumed the mirror clip with a voracious hunger. Before the talk show credits had even finished rolling across screens nationwide, the moment had exploded. Hashtags like Rachu, Carrey shattered, and La Leavitt wins truth were trending at warp speed, propelled by millions of shares, likes, and furious comments. The raw, unedited footage of Jim Carrey's public unraveling, his once confident face crumbling under the weight of Karoline Leavitt's single word, racked up millions of views in mere hours, a digital wildfire consuming every corner of the internet. The entire media landscape, from late-night comedy to morning news programs, was forced to confront the seismic event that had just unfolded. News anchors, usually so composed, struggled to maintain their impartiality as they played the clip on repeat, dissecting every micro-expression, every falter in Carrey's voice. Pundits, their faces grim or gleeful depending on their political allegiance, debated the one word with an intensity usually reserved for presidential elections. Was it genius? Was it a cheap shot? No one could deny its impact. The clip transcended mere entertainment. It became a cultural flashpoint, an undeniable symbol of the ongoing ideological warfare raging across the United States. Hollywood itself seemed to gasp, its glittering facade momentarily dimmed by the sheer, unvarnished power of a single, well-placed truth. The public reaction was a microcosm of the nation's deep-seated polarization. For Leavitt's supporters, the moment was nothing short of miraculous. She was hailed as a lioness, a fearless champion who had stared down the embodiment of elite condescension and emerged victorious. Her calm composure in the face of Carrey's theatrical rage became a symbol of strength, proof that authentic conviction could indeed fell even the most established Goliaths. Bumper stickers and T-shirts emblazoned with "mirror" began to appear, cementing the word into the lexicon of political defiance. Conversely, for Jim Carrey's loyalists, the scene was an unspeakable tragedy, a barbaric assault on artistic freedom, a moment of gotcha journalism that unfairly targeted a brilliant mind. They rushed to his defense, launching counter-hashtags and condemning Leavitt as a purveyor of hate. Yet even in their impassioned defenses, there was an undertone of unease, a subtle acknowledgement that something profound had shifted. The once unquestionable authority of Carrey's comedic commentary had been irrevocably chipped away. His sarcastic smile, once a weapon, now seemed to many like a mask hiding unease, a puppet with cut strings. He was no longer just the jester. He was the jester who had been unmasked, his vulnerability laid bare for the world to see. The echoes of that moment continue to reverberate, a lasting testament to the power of a single word and the fragility of even the most formidable public personas. It was more than a talk show debate. It was a cultural reckoning, a stark reminder that in an age of performative outrage and carefully curated images, genuine truth, delivered with unyielding precision, can still cut through the noise and expose what lies beneath. Karoline Leavitt's mirror wasn't just an attack on Jim Carrey. It was a reflection on an entire segment of society, a moment that deeply reflects the polarization in today's United States, where values and beliefs clash on public platforms and where sometimes the smallest spark can ignite the biggest inferno. The truth, fired like a bullet, had found its mark. And that, dear viewers, is the untold story of a moment that shook the foundations of Hollywood and sent ripples across the nation. If you were captivated by this deep dive, don't forget to like this video, share it with friends who need to hear this truth, and comment below with your thoughts on this epic showdown. And for more incredible stories that the mainstream won't tell you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Until next time, stay vigilant and never stop seeking the truth.